fear is thoughts. That's all it is. Oftentimes, it's not actually the thing which we're afraid of. It's the thought of the thing.
And you gave me a copy of that book. Actually, we've got a copy here.
Yeah, the author of this very good book, Take Your Shot, which I read a couple of years ago and shared the shit out of in my email list. I just absolutely loved it.
People who are entrepreneurs who've got an idea and want to start something, they find creative ways of talking themselves out of it. You've got an idea. The only way that you're going to know for sure whether your idea has any substance or not is to execute it. Here's something I haven't shared with anybody.
Robin, welcome to Figuring It Out. Really great to have you and to finally be recording with you here today.
Yeah, likewise. We had to work hard, didn't we, to get this this sort of get us together in the same room at the same time.
We did. And also welcome to the studio. This is actually, you're my first guest. I'm recording here, so finally got a studio. So you're my first guest with whom I'm recording here today. So 2 occasions in one.
I'm honoured. Thank you.
Well, pleasure to have you here. And normally I tend to start by asking my guests to tell me about their journey. But I feel like with this one, I want to start differently. And I probably will ask you about your journey towards the end. The reason being, you gave me a copy of your book, which is Take Your Shot.
Yep.
And I love the book and I read it in one day. And we were chit-chatting earlier and I said how effective, to the point. The book like literally just saw what the purpose of it was, growing a business, selling. And at the very end of the book, you said, if you've triggered even a small light bulb moment in whoever's reading it, you've attained your target. And that's the reason here today, because I really want to talk about it.
Cool.
So let's talk about the title of your book, Take Your Shot, which I'm sure if I were to look it up on Google, it would be something to do with being brave, going for it. But I do feel like everyone's got a different type of DNA, and taking your shot would mean something different to everyone. What does taking your shot means to you? Why the title of the book?
Well, it was a little bit of a play on, I think it was Michael Jordan, wasn't he? He said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So there was a little element of that on it. This is my version of it. But
okay.
I think a lot of business owners specifically, so people who are entrepreneurs who've got an idea and want to start something, they find creative ways of talking themselves out of it. So they'll build up like brick walls, and that could be something as simple as they think that they need money in order to start a business, or maybe that their idea isn't good enough to take to market, you know, despite the fact that they might have come up with a really great idea and maybe their mum or cousin or brother or somebody's like pushing and encouraging them to do something. But the reality is, like, in Western culture, in life, generally these days, there's not very much to be fearful of. So these barriers are generally like fear-based. And there's only two things which can really kind of go wrong when you're starting out a business. You can either look a bit dumb, a bit stupid, or you can lose a bit of money. And actually the reality is neither of those are like world-ending or really that bad. And they can both be mitigated or fixed if the worst happens. It's a bit different if you're on the plains of Africa and have to walk 10 miles down to the river to get your water daily, right? There's genuine things like hippos and crocodiles and lions to be afraid of, right? But in business, like, the reality is, like, you know, even if you look a bit stupid or lose a bit of money, you can go and get another job, or go and just, if there's people who were taking a mickey out of you because you made a fool of yourself, for example. It's so rare that happens, but that's what people think could go wrong. So the idea is that you should take your shot. If you've got an idea, the only way that you're going to know for sure whether your idea has any substance or not is to execute it. And I'm one of those people. My DNA is, I would always rather know. I would rather know if something works. I'd rather know if it doesn't work, because then I can course correct and do something different if I need to along the way. But for other people though, their fear could be, so I would say I have fear just like everybody else, but I have a low tolerance to not knowing the answer. I'd rather know the answer and put myself through a little bit of pain. Some people don't have a great deal of tolerance to that painful sort of process of like the learning and the hard part of starting something new and going through those like challenges. So you've got to figure out where your level of tolerance lies, how big your fear is to start off with, and how long you can tolerate not knowing versus like that desire to want to know. And then, just take your shot, just give it a go, and then you know.
Interesting. And I was going to say, courtesy to an event by Ali Abdaal last year, that's where we met. We met at Hyde Park. And I remember you being there. I think there were hundreds of people, and everyone was really chatting to everyone, getting to know each other. There was a bit of networking there. And I remember you standing there in a corner. There were so many people around you, and you were handing out copies of your book. And I walked up to you and I said, hello, I've got a podcast, introduced myself. And you gave me a copy of that book. Actually, we've got a copy here. And as you can tell, I've been taking notes. I've been bookmarking them. And then you actually signed the book and you said, be fearless, Gemma, get that first sponsor. So I don't have a sponsor yet, But then you wrote Be Fearless. It's interesting how you talk about the fear of judgment, and we are sometimes constraining ourselves by not going for it. What is the one thing that you think we fear?
Well, a lot of people mistake being fearless for being reckless, and that's not what it's about. There's a certain element of like calculation around, taking that first shot. Fear for me though, I mean, look, when you actually start to break down the fear response, like there's some just basic psychology around that. When the reptile brain, the reticular activator system kind of kicks off and the blood drains from your brain and, goes into your heart and your legs, basically in your arms, so that you can either fight it or run away from it. Or in some cases, you might be so afraid of whatever the thing is that you just stop altogether. But fear is thoughts. That's all it is. Oftentimes, it's not actually the thing which we're afraid of. It's the thought of the thing.
Right.
And a lot of people don't, when they start to rationalize it and break it down, a lot of people don't recognize that because it's a very physiological, almost instantaneous sort of response. So as an example of that, have you ever jumped out of a plane?
I have.
You have jumped out of a plane?
But I was with someone.
Okay, you were strapped to somebody else.
I was strapped to someone.
If you try and recall the time, so from the point where you booked it and you knew you were going to jump out of that plane to the point where the build-up happened over a number of days or weeks in advance, you then on the day drove to the airfield, and then you get to the airfield and you pull on the jumpsuit and go for the training, and then finally they sort of take you out into the runway and you can see the aeroplane you're going to go and jump out of.
Right.
Then finally you get into the plane and then you get attached to your companion who you're jumping at, and you shuffle towards the door. None of that. Now, I can guarantee you're recalling that event now in your head. And if there was an element of fear or anxiety around it, you probably got a bit of sweaty palms and your probably heart starting to race 10 or 20 beats faster.
I feel triggered.
Yeah, we're not about to jump out of a plane, but the thought of it is enough to trigger that fear response. Right. So a lot of people don't slow down enough to see whether that thought is rational or not. Because if you now think about, well, actually, you're not about to jump out of a plane. It's okay. And you give
I could almost see myself there right now when you're telling me.
So I'm now telling you, right, put that thought out of your mind, give yourself a bit of self-care for a moment and remind yourself that you're safe. Your feet are firmly planted on the floor. You're on terra firma. You can feel the seat underneath your bum and you're safe, right? You're not about to jump out of a plane. And all of a sudden you can have the opposite physiological response, go, oh, actually, I'm all right. I'm going to be okay. I'm safe. And in business, coming back to, look, I know that your podcast isn't necessarily just for business owners, but it's what I know best. It's what I've done for 20 years.
Love it.
So knowing that, oftentimes it's the little things in business that people are afraid of, which stop them from achieving their goals, right? Okay. I've done podcast interviews, and I hope it's not my ego driving this, right? But I've done 100 plus podcast interviews. So me showing up talking is kind of like, okay, now I've got over the hump of maybe feeling a bit silly or worrying about saying something stupid or, I don't know, giving a piece of misinformation or something like that.
Because you probably did the first few times.
I probably did. I did, yeah. And it was like you got to get through that uncomfortable. And it was very uncomfortable to start off with. I'd say something and then I'd find myself going bright red and getting really embarrassed and self-conscious. And I remember I had a fantastic speaker coach, right, who I mentioned in the book, a guy called Michael Trigg.
Okay.
Very, very great friend. He very sadly passed away last year. Side note, it was a great privilege. I got to actually film his funeral, his memorial, which is just such a privilege. But he was a proper old school, British gentleman in a lot of respects. And I remember he was watching me talk at an event which I was hosting. And partway through, he called me out. And I'm in the middle of doing my thing, 40-minute keynote.
In front of people?
In front of people. He stood up. He casually just walked over while I'm speaking. I'm like, what's going on here then? And he said, Robin, come over. Because he'd done a bit of mentoring with me on the speaking side of things. Great guy. I just trusted him. So I knew when he stood up, there was gravitas. He had something to say. So he pulled me to one side and he said, Robin, he said, you're making this all about you. And I was like, oh, sorry, what do you mean? He said, I can see you're not breathing. You're nervous. I can see you fidgeting. You're stumbling over your words. You've been going now for 15 minutes. He said, just take a deep breath. Remember that all of these people in this audience, and there's about 80 people there, they've got your back. They trust you. They want to learn from you. If you stay in this current state, they're not going to learn anything from you. So to just slow down, take a deep breath, go back out there and remember these people have got your back. total game changer instantly. Like for me, all of that fear and anxiety I'd built up
Went
just
away.
gone. And I had so many people then come up to you afterwards and they say, "Oh God, what did Michael say?" Because it completely transformed like your way of being, right? But it was all of the stuff that I was saying up here about what I thought a speaker should be like, how I thought a speaker should present, and all of these different things. Look at me now. I'm t-shirt and jeans guy, right? Mm-hmm. What's your typical impression of what a business coach should be?
Okay, you know what the answer is going to be.
Yeah.
Someone suited, someone very formal.
Yeah, formal is probably suit, tie, maybe grey hair. Not that there's any rights or wrongs about how people dress and things like that, right?
Feel, yeah.
More of a corporate sort of feel,
Exactly.
maybe a slightly punched, all of this sort of stuff, right? And I tried doing that when I first started coaching.
And that wasn't you.
And it just wasn't me. And I remember going into coaching sessions with nice, button-down shirt on and smart. I always kept the jeans on, or I might wear a smart pair of chinos, nice smart pair of shoes. I sat there thinking, I'm a fucking fraud. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to
You're
swear.
allowed to swear.
But that was what was going on in my head. I just didn't feel comfortable. What was the quality of my coaching like in those scenarios? It was a little bit uncomfortable, not just for me, but also for the person that I was coaching. The moment I knew that, again, it's that point when you make a decision, this is who I am, this is who I want to be. There are going to be some people who love it and they get it, and they're my people. There's going to be others who don't get it and they don't love it and they're not my people. And the moment, again, so there's a fear attached to that, a fear of rejection. Because if people don't like you, it's a natural human instinct to want to be accepted by your tribe, right? So if people don't like you, it must be me, it must be a problem with me. But actually, tribes with an S on the end of it, plural, exist because there are different groups of villagers, tribes people who are their people and they identify with them.
There's a sense
and
of
that's the way that it's always been, right? So it's the same in business. It's the same in life as well. It's why we join sports clubs, for example, because we identify with maybe that specific sport, but there might be a specific type of person who plays that specific sport and you get them. They're just your people. And so when you create safe environments of having the right people around you, and you know who you are in amongst all of that as well, the fear, because you create a safe space, the fear can just kind of subside and then you get more confidence because the feedback, it can be a little bit toxic because it can create that sort of echo chamber.
Right.
If you're not careful. But equally, there's a lot of people who don't care about that either. They're just happy to be who they are.
I love those different analogies that you had there in your storytelling. And I think one of the things that I really liked with the book was about the storytelling. I don't want to spoil it for readers who might get a copy of the book, but maybe just touching base on this particular point. So just a quick synopsis maybe about the book. So it's about a regular guy who's for a living basically provides golf lessons, and then he's struggling a bit financially. He cannot afford to take time out of work because it's a model that's driven on an hourly rate. That is people signing up and then he charges them by the hour. So you kind of get where the business model is leading him to until he meets this new client who then eventually volunteers to be his business coach. Is that kind of a fair summary about the book?
That's a pretty good summary, yeah.
Okay. What I really want to get into is chapter 4. So in chapter 4, you start basically getting into the crux of the storytelling, and you talk about how it is quite important to actually focus on one particular thing and not many others, because without a clear sense of direction, it's almost like you're wandering almost mindlessly. And I know this question sounds a bit generic, but in our day-to-day, we've got so many things going on. How do you block out the noise and literally focus on one particular goal and keep chasing it?
So there's something which you touched on there, which really, really subtle, right? So about where we're so busy, why do we find it so hard to create focus for ourselves? Again, that's a fear response. That's fear of success. Because if I'm intentional and it goes wrong, well, who's to blame?
Me.
So I'll just bury my head in social media and scroll all day long and watch crap on TV and this, that, and the other, because then there's no excuse. If I didn't try, I can't fail. Right? So that was just really subtle little thing there, which you said, which, and I find all of that human psychology around this quite fascinating. Where you meet people who are fearless, so not reckless, but fearless. They've kind of set those fears of success to one side and they're willing to put themselves out there. You still need to have a sense of direction and a sense of purpose, because otherwise when times will get tough, like it's just a matter of life, like things get tough from time to time. If you don't have a sense of purpose, you're not going to have the momentum to carry you through those really tough times. So if business gets a bit hard, maybe you don't end up with the right sorts of clients, or you can see the funds starting to deplete down from your, in your bank account, and you start to have those moments where you're like, oh, I might have to go back and get a job or something like that if you've been running a business. It's that passion, that drive and that sense of purpose which carries you through that, the belief that doesn't matter what I do, I'm going to have some success out of this. I'm going to push forward for it. But in that specific example in the book, the idea was that because the book's based on a golf pro, so he lays out the golf balls, and then you have the one which is, at the North Star.
With a red flag.
Yeah, that's it. So a lot of people are just moseying their way through life without any real sense of direction. They're just kind of, and then they wonder why they aren't rich, famous, don't have the things which they want, maybe don't have the right partner that they desired, and things like that. It's a bit like going through life or driving a car without the first thing you do if you're going on a long journey in a car in 2024 is you punch in the zip code into the sat nav, right? And then the wizardry, the gadgetry will figure out the best, most optimal route to get there.
Right.
In life, and for ourselves, though, we don't necessarily have that GPS, that route finder to get us there. But if we know where we're heading and we're quite specific and intentional about it, we can then start to work backwards from that and figure out what the most sort of optimal route is. And it also, when we get that sense that, the gut instinct kicks in and we're like, oh, this doesn't feel like this is working, or this doesn't feel like it's the right direction, you can then course correct. You can then just sit there and go, okay, is the thing that I'm about to do going to get me towards that goal? So it could be, take a very practical thing. It could be like most people sort of idealize around, it's probably slightly capitalistic, but it's a simple thing to work on. But like a house, your dream home, right? For example, we've got an idea of what our dream home looks like. Everybody can visualize what that is. Whether some people might already be fortunate enough they've got it already, which is fantastic. Majority of people maybe are sort of living, it's like a stopgap where they are and they've got an idea of where they want to get to. Doing something as simple as going onto Rightmove or any other property site and printing out a picture, like doing a bit of research, printing out a picture of that dream home, and then taking that picture and putting it with a magnet on your fridge. So every day when you go to the fridge to get your milk out with your morning coffee, you see a picture of that dream home. It just triggers, things in your head you start looking at it and going, oh, okay, what do I have to do today in order to get myself a little step closer to getting that home? Could be something really simple. Like I'm going to, rather than go out and splash out on going to the cinema for a meal, I might take 10 or 20 pounds and put it in a savings account. There's a lot of people who go, well, 10, 20 quid, what difference is it going to make to a £200,000 home or a whatever, £50,000 car? But it's a tiny little step closer. Then you do that every single day and you build up positive habits around it. It starts to become habitual. And then you get comfortable with not having that 10 or 20 pounds every day. Because you just put it to one side. You live within your means. Then when that gets comfortable, maybe you start doing more of it. You put £50 aside or £100 a day aside, depends on how much income you've got coming in. So it's a gradual process, but you've got to start with that vision, that picture in mind of what the end result is, and then, gradually work your way backwards to that. You mentioned Ali Abdaal, right? This is really embarrassing.
Go on.
That was a couple of years worth of me setting out my intentions and having that goal in mind. At the start of 2020, this is so embarrassing.
God, we want to know now.
At the start of 2023, I don't think Ali even knows this actually. Start of 2023, January the 1st, I was sat on my computer, this is really sad, sat on my computer and I photoshopped a picture of Ali and me and a microphone's in the middle being interviewed.
Because you were on his podcast.
And that went onto my podcast, onto my vision board, sorry, yeah. Along with a few other things.
He needs to know those.
Yeah. And the reason for that is, so I've been in business on February the 1st, was the 20-year anniversary this year of me registering my first limited company. And I built and sold my agency over 12 years, sold that in 2016, and then started growing the coaching practice. Have you got friends with kids?
I do.
Right.
Not many, but I do.
So do you, when you see your friends or family who've got young kids, I can guarantee this has probably you've either thought it or you've said it. Oh my gosh, haven't your kids grown? Right. So you see highlight reels of your friends' kids, your family's kids, right? At various points of their life, like a few months or a few years apart each time.
Right.
So of course they've shot up compared to when you saw them last time. Your own kids, on the other hand, it's a very gradual, slow process. You don't notice how much they're growing each and every day because you're with them every single day. They're just a tiny microscopic bit bigger. And it's the same in business, right? Business is a gradual sort of process of like it evolving and growing and things like that. But I got really frustrated in 2022, post-COVID, all the stress which came with that. And I'd felt my business wasn't where I wanted it to be. I've done like 18 years in business. I've got my stripes. I deserve better, right? And sometimes you need to big yourself up and kick yourself up the bum like that just to kind of move forward. And I'd got caught up in like shiny syndrome, other people's dreams, other people's ideas of what it looked like to grow a business. So doing a lot of stuff on social and
chasing the shiny thing.
Yeah, basically. And people were emailing me daily with like, hey, we can get you 15 leads a day and all this stuff. And I was starting to buy into it because that's what you're just exposed to every day a lot of the time when you're running a small business. And there was so much noise. I didn't really have a clear direction. I don't mind admitting it. Even the fearless business coach himself is not immune to like bouts of stupidity, right? But this is where you can course correct. You can put things right. So I decided 1st of January, I'm going to be hyper intentional this year. I'm going to find like 2 or 3 things marketing wise that work for my business. And that if I put all of my efforts, not spreading it between like 4,000 things, and doing them 12 times, I'll find like a few things and do them 4,000 times. And so it was brilliant. It's the best thing I ever did because immediately knowing what direction I was heading in and being intentional, right, I'm going to get on Ali's podcast. There's like 20,000 things I can immediately just say no to. Those emails come in, go on, buy my stuff. I'm like, nope.
Blocking out the noise there.
Yeah. Social media, all this daily posting. I was like, fired the person who was doing my socials. I just decided I wasn't going to spend so much time scrolling and stuff. Again, I'd be intentional about who I was engaging with on social. So I focused in on 10 to 20 influential people who were 1 or 2 degrees separated in terms of connection, and started to figure out what I wanted my business to look like, working in partnership alongside these people. I don't know if this is where you wanted the chat to go.
No,
today,
I think it sounds like what you're describing to me, the 20-80 rule.
Oh, yeah.
It's literally like focusing on, and I spoke about this in a recent video that I made on YouTube, but it's like trying to focus on the 20% critical inputs that's going to drive 80% of your results. And I love what you're saying because I do feel, at least for me, I'm a huge multitasker and my mind's running at a million miles per hour. And I feel sometimes I look at my to-do list and it's almost like starting a new company, right? You might be chasing, like, to your point, like the socials, the marketing, while even picking the phone and calling, cold calling the prospect clients, which is the one thing that would actually get you exponentially closer to making that first sales. When you look at your to-do list, that one thing is actually last on your to-do list, right? Yeah. And I feel I love the point that you made in the book was about having that clear sense of direction. And there was this analogy where you talk about having the 30 golf balls out there and you can't really pick out which one. And then if you have a clear flag on it, then you can literally chase it.
Yeah.
So for me, that was like a good, like really good takeaway from the book.
Can I do a quick bit of coaching with you?
Go on.
Right.
Oh my God.
This may work, it may not.
Yeah, okay.
It's always the risk of doing this, but hey, I've been doing it for long enough now. So you quoted the Pareto Principle, 80-20. So I would argue that might still be a little bit too vague. So how could you be a bit more specific than 80-20? Which bit of that would you focus in on?
The 20%.
20%. And what would you do with it?
So for me, with the podcast, for instance, or at least let's talk about YouTube because that's the one thing I'm trying to really focus on. So for me, that's trying to be consistent and putting out a video every week.
Okay.
And the one thing I've stopped doing is, for instance, so I'll post a reel I'll engage, but try not to engage too much. For me, it's about the future planning. I need to have contents out, especially with my 9 to 5, which is not really 9 to 5. It's more than that. It's having consistency. It's one, consistency, and then two, forward planning. So I think like before I didn't have a backlog, which meant that when it got to the actual week, I was not posting. Then that means your traction stops dropping and so on.
Yeah. So what would be a dream outcome from your podcast?
The dream outcome, I think, would be one, creating or getting to 1,000 subscribers to start with on YouTube, very practically. So having a clear sense of community. And then two, eventually, and I say eventually, that is, maybe 2 years from here, being able to monetize it to the point where I can maybe scale down my hours. That would be the ultimate dream.
Okay, so 1,000 subscribers and monetization, that's what we're aiming for. Okay. So imagine you had to get 1,000 subscribers by this time next week. What would you do?
What would I do? I mean, I would still be doing the same thing because I feel like I've upgraded the system. I feel like you tell me, because you've been on YouTube. We all have people in common.
This is the thing. So I'm going to try and eke this out of this. So
I feel like, I don't know, I don't want to say it, but I feel like there needs to be an element of luck. I feel like if we're talking a week's timeline, there would need to be an element, and I hate the word, maybe an element of virality.
Possibly.
To pick up 1,000.
So virality requires some external circumstances to go in your favor, but they're out of your control. So we want to focus on something which is within your control.
Okay.
There's some gold here, and hopefully you'll see where I'm kind of going with this. Let's put a bit of jeopardy into this now. Did you have a favorite pet growing up?
I did.
Okay, tell us about your favorite pet, just so I know.
My favorite pet, a dog. Her name is Blush. She's still around. Actually. She's getting really old.
So now hopefully this won't be too upsetting for you, but we've got a week to find 1,000 subscribers, or Blush gets it.
Okay.
just I need to introduce a bit of jeopardy here, because we're going to make you work for this. Okay. So what would you do?
What would I do differently? Maybe take time off work for the whole week.
Okay.
Strategize.
Interesting. Yep.
Write down my plan completely.
Cool.
Check maybe with my editors if my podcasts and my videos are all on track. Publish. Maybe try to get hold of that 1 or 2 guests, because I feel with the guests, obviously, there's a better outreach, especially if it's someone who's got a bit of personnel and someone charismatic.
Okay. So one of the challenges when we're trying to come up with like ideas like this is that you're kind of basing, it's the raw you, by the way, not just you, but this is what people do. We base our future strategy on our past, because that's the only point of reference that we've got. So you've chosen things because that's all of the stuff that you've kind of set up to get to this point. Who do you know out there, and we've already mentioned a couple of names, who do you know out there who easily gets 1,000 subscribers in a week?
The likes of Ali Abdaal. There's this girl, I love her finance content, Nisha, Erica Kullberg.
Okay, so who would pick one? Who's your favorite, would you say?
I love Erica.
Okay, so Erica. What have you observed Erica doing that really successfully, that just gravitates people towards her, that, they're just like 1,000 people, bang. She probably gets like 1,000 an hour, I should think, or something.
Yeah, likely. She's got millions.
So what's she doing differently that maybe you're either not, or just she's doing it in a different way?
Probably to the point content, which I'm trying to focus on. Her videos are more of a short duration, to the point. Consistency, obviously, I think she does this full time, so obviously she has more time to put out content.
Yeah.
All credit due. So I would say consistency, more time, and just being to the point and giving value contents, really.
Okay. Does she have your audience?
Does she have my audience? She's got a much bigger audience. So.
No, but is there a crossover, would you say?
Is there a crossover? Probably not at this stage.
But even, how many followers, subscribers has she got?
Millions of it, like
millions.
a million.
So there must
2 million.
be, do you think there's a possibility that there might be 1,000 in there that would get you, they're your people, they vibe with you?
Possibly, especially if I'm doing finance contents, yes.
Yeah, okay. So, and this is like you'd have to hustle, there'd have to bit of luck, but do something which is in your control. So what I would do, and this is what I did with Ali. So here's the secret. I'll tell you my approach. Okay.
Spill the tea.
And like get it. A week is tough, right? I kind of do that, and your dog's going to be fine.
Well, I love how you pushed me there. It got me thinking.
Blush is going to be fine, by the way. It's just let everybody know we're not holding her in another room to ransom right now. Okay.
My baby.
So So with Ali, for example, so I was very hyper intentional about with Ali's podcast. You know, I had stalked him basically and photoshopped me and him together. Imagine if like somebody was doing that about like a celebrity or something. You'd have like real worries and concerns, wouldn't you, ordinarily? Anyway,
but we both love the guy.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I'm with you there.
So when I guested on his podcast, within the first, I think 60 days, I got 1,500 leads from that podcast. Right.
Wow.
And I, by the way, I didn't do that. I didn't want to get on there just as a way of like growing my business. Part of the rationale behind the 10 to 20 people I was sort of focused on at the start of the year was just people who are fun. Like, you know, Ali's book's about feel good productivity, right?
Yes.
I liked what they're about. I enjoyed hanging out with their teams. They were just decent, fun people to be around, and they're in business and they were curious, and it was just
a chill group.
So that I went in with that attitude, but just like the bonuses though, when I was on that podcast, 1,500 leads in like 60 days. I shipped over 600 copies of the book because that was just a gift. I love just giving books away to people because there's a lot of people who can't afford coaching or mentoring or, business can be a struggle to get start up in the first instance if you're locked in on that sort of financial thing. So the book's a nice way of like getting people started with business accessibly without having to spend tons of money. So I like giving them away. But I was just the impact, 175,000 views, I think that interview's like since had. So it made me realize if you're intentional, if you put yourself in the same room as these people that you can see a partnership with, an opportunity with, and you lead with value, so you're helpful. I had no desire to get anything back in return. It was just fun to be around these people. That's all I was getting from it. It's just a bonus that the other stuff happened. You could do that. I bet if there's 10 more Ericas, if you're intentional and physically, when you know that if Erica was speaking at an event on, what day are we now? I don't even know what day. It's Tuesday. Imagine she's doing the keynote at an event on Thursday and you pushed everything to one side and you were there, you bought a VIP ticket. You could go, if she's got a book, you could go and get her to sign the book, have a selfie with her. Imagine the amplification. Like you said, if you're there, you've just created your own luck by putting yourself in the same room as that person. Imagine all the other people who are just hiding behind social, too afraid to go up and speak to her, too afraid to ask for anything of her. They're not going to get what they want. Is it any wonder?
You know what? Like now thinking about it, the reason you're here today is because I was very close to not making it to Ali's even.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, Gemma, there's something out there. Just go. And it was great. And it was refreshing. And I met you and here you are today.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good reminder.
Trusted your intuition. That's another thing that a lot of people get wrong. They listen to this rather than this, and their gut instinct 90% of the time is right.
Your gut
if we
never
follow
lies.
That. Yeah. And even if our gut is that 1 in 10 times when it's wrong, again, you can easily just course correct and bring it back on track and use this to figure a way out of that problem if necessary. But again, too many people like intellectualize like problems rather than just, I'm just going to give it a shot and just put myself out there. And don't get me wrong, there's still stuff that I'm, I'm quite a socially anxious person. I find it quite hard, like going into a room full of strangers, even despite great in a business setting, put me in a room full of like the school dads when the first time I had to go and hang out with those guys. It's bloody intimidating, right?
You put on a good appearance.
Yeah.
Like you come across really confident.
But it's because we're talking about stuff that I know really well. If you started asking me questions about something I didn't know so well, first of all, I'd probably just say, Gemma, I don't know the answer to that. I'd just be brutally honest. Can we change the subject?
Right.
Because I've learned to do that now. But yeah, and if like a load of other people walked into the room all of a sudden who I don't know, because we've met, like, only once, but we've had conversations and things like that. So, but yeah, room full of strangers, I just take a little while just to kind of find my way in and,
Can I just push you on this though?
Please do.
So we were talking about taking a shot, right? And you were just coaching me and pushing me. This is what you can do. Thinking about what else I could re-strategize if I were to. So many businesses, if we go into the details about the book is about business, right? So let's talk about that for a second. If we look at the stats, it's almost like 20% of businesses fail in the first 2 years.
No, it's more than that. It's
probably more.
Yeah, it's about 50% of businesses in the first 3 years.
And apparently it's only 25% that makes it, 25% of businesses that make it through 15 years or more. So that's a lot.
Well, again, I think
it's even higher.
Is it okay if so the stats is that it's a lot lower than that actually. So it's 40% 50% make it through the first 3 years.
Wow, okay.
It's something like only 5% of that 50% make it to year 10. So it's a tiny proportion of
businesses. That's a tiny proportion.
Yeah.
So at some point, someone, or many people, would have attempted something and would have given up at some point.
Yeah.
And with a business, so with a podcast, for instance, right? I am incurring costs here. So it's the camera, we're now booking a studio. And some of them are sunk costs because your research, your marketing, your equipment, you're never going to get them back until you start making profit. And so many times when you look at the metrics and people talk about businesses, one thing that was a bit of a game changer for me, everyone talks about revenue. No one really talks about profit. And you're like, what about the cost? Tell me about the cost, right? Because that does change the metric.
Yep.
At some point, these people have given up.
Yeah.
So if I'm starting something new and I'm willing to keep pushing, till when do I push? What if that's never going to work for me? When should I know? What's the trigger? What's the inflection point for me to say, I've given it my best. This is not going to work for me. I need to stop and think about something else.
So the thing you're referring to there is something called sunk cost fallacy, which is where you've kind of invested so much, you kind of carry on regardless because you think you've effectively lost all of the money if you were to stop it. I think podcast-wise, I think the average podcast is, there's like 1 million plus podcasts now worldwide. The average number of podcast episodes is 7. So... And that's across 1 million podcasts. And think about like DOA, Diary of a CEO, Ali's podcast. I've done 150 episodes on mine. You know, there's people who are bringing that average up massively. So it's that typical like J curve, like, you know, that exponential curve where probably 90% of podcasts fall below that average of 7.
7?
7 episodes.
We're not talking seasons, we're talking episodes. 7
episodes. That means there's a lot of people out there, a vast majority that have done 1, 2 or 3 episodes and
that's
given up, that's it. So first of all, if you stay in the game for like a survival of the fittest and you do lots of episodes and you push yourself through it, even if there is a bit of expense, you're going to be light years ahead of like 90+% of the podcasts.
I've done more than 20 so far.
There you go. So you're already winning in that respect. Ali talks about as well about every time he records a video, like making it just slightly better, just pick one thing and make it slightly better each time. So you investing in kit and studios and things like that, that's where that investment is going. You're making it slightly better. There's also just impact theory, which is where like the impact your podcast is making, it feels like maybe it's not making an impact, but gradually, slowly over time, it's accumulating momentum and growth and more subscribers. And it might not feel like it's a lot, right? But it's compounding over time.
Okay.
And then based on what I said earlier on, well, hey, if you could get some kind of JV in place with Erica or somebody else, right? You've got that hot list of people it'd be great to partner up with. And get this, right? Here's something I haven't shared with anybody. When Ali started doing Deep Dive, his first guest is Gymshark Guy, and I'm sat there going, oh gosh, Gymshark Guy, like he's up here. So the imposter comes out, right? And then about 5 minutes later, I was like, no, come on, Robin. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, we're just people at the end of the day. And like, good for Ali because he's got this amazing guest on and he's got a series of amazing guests on. But I was like, how do I make this work for me? Because this is something which I want to do. This is good fun. This is like, let's make it work. So you need to pick your 10 Ericas, and maybe they have got 1 million subscribers, but don't let that stop you from trying to find creative ways to build a partnership with them. I can't remember who it was. I was listening to somebody on TikTok, and they said, anybody who has 1 subscriber or 1 like or 1 comment on their content, right, and is upset by that, should not be doing this, whatever it is, the thing, right? And the rationale behind that is because imagine if you walk into a networking meeting or a party and there's just 1 other person in that room. What are you going to do? You're just going to go, oh, it's only 1 person, turn around and walk out. No, that's the one most important person in the room. They're a human being. Why would you not want to go up there and connect with them, right? I know there are people who are in my position who get all snobby about what podcasts they go on because the podcast isn't big enough or it doesn't have enough subscribers or that person's not influential enough or things like that.
And then when it does blow up,
Yeah. And what happens then? And they're like, oh, can I come on your podcast now? No, because you dissed me when I had 10 subscribers, right? So look, we are humans at the end of the day. There is only so much potential, like so much capacity that we have, but I'd never turn down a podcast like interview. You know, if I didn't vibe with the person, that's a different thing. If I don't get them and I don't think it's a good fit, that's slightly different. But I would never do it based on somebody's like size of following or things like that, because, you know, you meet people on the way up, you meet people on the way back down again.
My second part to this question, now that we're still talking about costs, right? So I'm working. So I've got a 9-to-5. I work in finance. I'll be honest, for me, that's a privilege because I can afford to spend that much on my podcast. I can afford to scale it up. It's obviously money that's coming out of my paycheck, but I can afford to do that. Maybe not thinking about a podcast particularly, but thinking about a general business.
Yeah.
The reality is that we're dealing with inflation and so many people live paycheck to paycheck. If anything, even Forbes only recently said in the US, I think it's about 78% who are living paycheck to paycheck. And that's like, what, 4 in 5 people?
Yeah.
Someone's just trying to scale up a business, or forget about scaling up, but really starting. That's like the cost that you're going to incur.
Yeah.
And then let alone, we don't know whether it's going to work or not. Do you have any advice at all?
I met a guy who his asset-wise net worth was $600 million. Guess what his biggest fear was?
$600 million.
He was worth $600 million. Guess what his biggest fear was?
Losing all of it?
So you can have everything and still have the same scarcity mindset around losing whatever it is that you've built, whatever your net worth is.
But so many people talk about having the abundance mindset. Do you think that's just wishy-washy?
So
do you believe in it?
Right, quantify. You'd need to quantify what an abundance mindset looks like, because there's an abundance mindset. Imagine this is the mistake a lot of people make, right? So imagine if you're like there's a part of me, I'm not religious, right? But there's a part of me which believes that there is a bit of woo-woo energy out there that kind of like, you have to ask for what you want. The universe, if you ask of the universe, it generally is quite good at delivering something, right? But you have to be really specific about what you ask for. If you just go out and go, I want more money, the universe doesn't know whether to drop a £10 note on the floor or a lottery ticket. So it kind of makes it up, and it ends up like a relative dies and they give you £1,392 and you go, oh, that's nice, but it's not enough. Right? So you've got to be really specific about what it is that you want when it comes to shifting from a scarcity to an abundance mindset. The second thing though is as well, if somebody goes, right, I'm going to be specific and I'm going to ask Miss Universe for, $1 million, right? And then $10 shows up, right? How many people stamp their feet and go, oh, well, I wanted $1 million and I haven't got what I want. So there's this thing about pride, right? I'd be grateful if I got $10, irrespective of what my goal is. Like what I said earlier on, $10 is $10 closer to my goal. So I shouldn't let pride get in the way. I should go, thank you, that's helpful. Now what else can I do to get closer to my goal? And then bank the £10 or invest it, whatever that looks like. Think and Grow Rich is like, a lot of people, it's like Marmite. People either love Think and Grow Rich or they hate it. Right? I hated it. I hated the notion of Think and Grow Rich for a long time. And then I actually read it like several times. One of my mentors suggested read it 7 times. I read it 7 times and he said, you'll find something new every time like you do with a good film. I read it. And then it started to kind of make sense, because it's kind of like, you need to ask of the universe what you want, make sure that you're setting something aside, in terms of savings. When you get to a certain amount of money, you can then start to reinvest it. So there's really practical lessons in that book. Yes. If you avoid the manifestation part of it, which I have a massive problem with, because manifestation, let's face it, is bullshit, and that's probably going to piss a lot of people off.
Ooh, controversial there.
Yeah. Because manifestation without some kind of action is just a dream. Right. It's a hope, right? It's just a brilliant fact which I discovered when I first started coaching, right? When the National Lottery first came about, they surveyed a load of people, right, across the UK, and 60% of Scottish people base their future financial situation on winning the national lottery. As a percentage, guess how many actually bothered to go out of that 60%? How many went out and bought a ticket? Half the people, 30% of the Scottish population are wishing they're going to win the lottery, and they're not even bothering to go down to the newsagent to go and buy a ticket.
It's almost like you're manifesting it, but not taking action.
Yeah, exactly.
How are you even going to get closer to winning it?
Yeah.
Let alone that's a binary outcome.
Yeah, that's it.
One in whatever.
Same as putting yourself in the room with Erica. Instead of just hoping you're going to get, I know you're putting action in place. We're here recording episodes, but where I was going with the Pareto Principle, right? So we're going to backtrack. This is like a really terrible comedy show, but then they pull it all together at the end, right? Where you said Pareto 80-20, you can 80-20 the 20%. So the 20% of the 20% gives you 4%. The 4% is putting yourself in the same room as Erica and asking, being helpful and just asking something.
You got me thinking there. And they say, right, you're the average of the 95% people that you hang out with. Not that we're going to be besties and hang out together, but if I manage to be in the same room and someone else knows her and blah.
Yeah, exactly. And the money, coming back to your question though, just now about when is enough and when is enough, and if you're not in that abundance mindset, how do you get into the mindset of kind of spending that money? Well, again, I did some work. There's a great guy, actually. Sorry, I'm name dropping a little bit here, but hopefully these are resources which people can go and look up, and if they're thinking about starting a business, and get really great business advice for free. But Simon Squibb is a great influencer. There's some things which I kind of agree with the way that he's going about it, and some things which I'm not so sure about, but he's making an impact, and that's the main thing. He's created a free platform called Help Bank, where people who've got ideas for business can go on there, and there's experts like myself on there answering questions for free. And it was in the early days, it was really fascinating because people associated Help Bank with money. So they came on there, and the most common question was, can I have some money to start my business?
Okay.
And without any kind of hesitation or deviation, all of the experts in unison were all saying, you don't need money to start a business. Even if you wanted to go and start a car washing business, well, if you go and knock on 100 doors in your local community and hey, I see you've got a couple of nice cars on the drives looking a bit dirty. Do you want me to clean them for you? And they say, oh, yeah, great. Well, how much does it cost? And, well, I noticed you don't have a bucket. Oh, yeah, we're just starting out. You've probably got a bucket and a sponge. Could I just use yours? Again, people are too proud. They don't want to ask. They want to they have the perfect business. They've got to have the perfect bucket and sponge and hose and material like the degreasers and the scraping tools for the wheels and all. They've got to have everything just perfect, and of course that takes money. No, bullshit. You go and knock on some doors. You're humble and you say, "I'm going to wash your car, but I need to borrow your bucket and sponge to do it." And, the first 10 that we're going to do for free, actually, provided you leave us a Google review afterwards if you're happy with it.
I love
just
that.
Starting out. Cost nothing. There might be genuinely some businesses where you need a bit of investment. If somebody wants to make a leap and invest in property, for example, you need some capital to put down.
But not all businesses.
Not all businesses.
That's what I'm hearing.
But you can go, okay, well, I'll stick. I want the property thing. I want to work. But I'm going to eat humble pie for the first 2 years and go and do a job I don't want to necessarily do long term, but to build up 30K that I can then put down as a deposit on my first property to do up.
Right.
So I'll go and clean windows and cars. I'll go and mow people's lawns. I'll go and do clean toilets. I'll do whatever it takes to get that money first, because I've got that goal sorted out and this is how I'm going to get there. And then when I've built the capital up, then I'll invest some of that into my first property or my first whatever business is that I'm doing. People are just too humble, they're too lazy, they're too proud, that to do this stuff. But the great news is, for those that are willing to do that stuff, it gives us the unfair advantage.
I love that perspective. And you kind of put it into context for me there, because I think I've been reaching out to so many people when I started the podcast, and some people replied to it. I had one quite recently, a guest that I really wanted to have on, and she's been on some really great podcasts, and she's got a following close to 1 million, right? So, but I did reach out to the agent. She was like, no. And I said, can you actually tell me what I need to have in the future? Like what credentials I need to have? Is it more subscriber count? What sort of traction? Never got back to me. That's fine. But it's going to go into my manifestation.
Yeah.
It's going to go onto my manifestation board, and who knows in the future. Robin, in the interest of time, last 2 questions. When you look at the baby boomers, the millennials, the Gen Z, Where do you rank on the scale of, because I feel like with Gen Z, they are go-getters. It's almost at the risk of, probably another controversial statement here, but they are go-getters, while millennials are somewhat a bit more comfortable, reluctant, trying to take the plunge, but still debating, questioning. I'm one of those.
Yeah.
The fear of judgment. Baby boomers, maybe that was a different time. Social media was not about. When you look at all of these three combined, where do you rank on the scale of really chasing it at the risk of being blindsided, or just being comfortable and not taking risks because you've got a 9-to-5, things are going well for you? Where do you rank on that scale?
What, me personally? Or God, that's a good question. So I mean, the tricky thing is, so I've only ever had one proper job. It was 4 years as a systems analyst, and I learned everything that you shouldn't do in a business there, because the guy who owned the business was fantastically creative at designing products, but rubbish at running a business. And he knows that I've actually had beers with him down the pub since I've grown up a bit, and we've had that conversation. It's wonderful, and he appreciates my feedback now. But so I've always run businesses, and I'm a mathematician. That's my kind of background. So I like to kind of calculate probability and things like that. And so a lot of what I do is very quietly sort of calculated. I kind of work out the different options and what's the most likely sort of route that's going to work and things like that. I'm not a massive risk taker. There's certain things which I do. So I've got a little side hustle which I'm running at the moment, and I've got no hesitation going out and buying a $9,500 domain. I did that at the start of the year, and most people go, well, you can go on to like Fasthost or whatever, buy GoDaddy and buy a domain for $10, right? But this, because of my background in marketing and business, and I don't like property, but what I like is digital stuff. So I'll buy a digital property, which is a domain, right? It's an age domain. It's been around for a while. I look at the profile of it. It's got some backlinks, some from TechCrunch and some really big like online magazines and Forbes and stuff like that. So it's got really good credentials. That's a really solid base to build my business off. Most people would look at $9,500 for a domain as a bit of a dumb investment. My goal,
like a scary.
Yeah, my goal is that some people will spend lots of money on property and flip them and sell them for more money. My goal is I'll buy a domain, flip it, sell it for lots of money, because that's what I know best. So I suppose to answer your question, I choose to risk in areas where I'm an expert, areas which I know about, rather than, there's tons of people out there who are like, want to start a business, so I'll go and like invest in crypto. Well, do you understand the mechanics of like how crypto works? I'm a smart guy. I've spent some time studying it, because I was like, well, everybody's talking about it, so I want to understand at least a little bit of it. I can't get under the hood of like understanding what crypto's about enough to warrant like putting loads of my money into it. I'll leave that to other people who get it and get finance and everything else. It's not my bag. So I guess I play a bit of a safe game by picking stuff that I'm knowledgeable about.
Okay.
I've got a lot of respect for a lot of the, I sound really patronizing, but the kids these days who are like quietly quitting jobs. They're finding creative ways to like make money on the side. Some of the side hustles where people are, like the whole job culture these days, I think is like so incredibly toxic. And like I can have a massive rant now about the way the government is set up and schooling and education and stuff. But I think we need pressure and things to be run badly by certain people, i.e. the government, because that's what forces people to be creative and creatively solve problems. And they're like watching my my daughters like playing Roblox and figuring that game out. And I had a Game Boy when I was growing up, right? Do you remember the Nintendo Game Boy with like Tetris, right? Very 2D and everything. And watching them play Roblox, I'm like, geez, they're going to be smart kids when they're old. They're going to solve like really meaningful problems. So I think like the differences of generations, I think is a really great thing, because I know we're wrapping up. I could ramble on about this stuff for years, but like even something as simple as like the internet, right? We've been through the Industrial Revolution and the Agricultural Revolution, these ages which we go through. An age is typically measured by about 200 to 250 years in total. So you think about like the internet revolution. With 30 years, the internet's 34 now. So we're like 10%, of the way into the internet revolution. And you look at the advances of like AI and the games like Roblox, which kids play these days and stuff like that. And you're like, geez, this is like...
It's almost scary.
It's scary how the world is going to change and adapt over the next, couple hundred years.
I think it's also interesting because once you leave school, or at least personally for me now, when I look at this generation, it's almost like you go for schooling, you know whether you're passing or failing because you get given a scoreboard, right? You go for an exam, you get given a scoreboard.
Yep.
And then once you leave, it's like you're out there in the world. There's no scoreboard telling you whether you're failing or winning at life. Forget scoreboard. You don't even know whether you're going for an examination unless you go through something tough, like a breakup where someone's passed away in your family, or you've lost a job, and then that's suddenly the moment of where you need to pick yourself up again. And then I look at this generation where they're like, go-getters, we doing it no matter what, 9 to 5, who cares, let's go for it.
Yep.
Hence the question. And as someone who's got kids as well, I think you can see where I was getting to with that sort of generational divide there maybe.
Yeah, we can get really bogged down by like academics and everybody passing maths and English, but what about the artists? What about the coders? What about the creative people? You need a balance, like a mix of all sorts of different types of people. I think shoehorning people and like categorizing them. My daughter's getting ready to do the 11 plus in September, right? And she's going to be pigeonholed at that point. But the thing is, like, we've been around lots of schools, and if she gets into the grammar school, it was touch and go. I hope she does. There's a fantastic art department there.
Nice.
Do you see? So you can get in on academics, but what she loves is art. And my wife's on the academic camp. I'm in the like, no, go and be creative. Like, be a brilliant photographer. Be a brilliant, like, create something amazing. Like the maths, like, who cares?
And as someone, I think who we said we would touch on your journey. You started with a creative agency, and then went through this whole journey of trying to find what you like, and now you're a business coach. Yeah. What's the best advice we could wrap up this podcast on?
Yeah, I think too many people. So I had you can get, well, it's kind of linked to what we were just talking about, actually. You can get pigeonholed into like having a certain type of identity. And so when I sold the agency and I started, the mentoring side of things was just a little bit of a happy accident. People were like, oh, you sold your agency. Could you teach us how to do that? So I started just meeting people for coffees and just helping them with their businesses. And then it morphed into a business coach. And I remember one day my life coach, he said, oh, Robin, you'd make a really great business coach. And I was like, business coach? The whole coaching space is like, there's a whole nother story around that. But then I tried it on for size and started to hone in on the types of clients I wanted to work with, found my people, stopped wearing the smart shirts and put my t-shirt on. And then I discovered who I was. And I think people just kind of need to give things a shot. Like, we can make so many excuses and be afraid of so much stuff, but you just need to get out there and take your shot. You just gotta, that's not a shameless plug, by the way. I genuinely believe this. There are so many great people who give themselves reasons and excuses not to do something. And I think just get out there and give it a go. If it doesn't work out, who cares?
Amazing. Well, I've got my dopamine hit listening to you. Robin, thank you for these words of wisdom. It was great to finally record with you, and here's to wishing we can all be as fearless as your t-shirt says, as fearless as you are. Thank you so much for coming on. I love chatting to you, and hopefully I get to see more of your work, but amazing to have you today. So thank you for coming down to London.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.